All right, joining me by phone is former WKBW and WGRZ TV personality, media guy, and current media guy, actually, but we'll talk about that in a little bit, and former Erie County Comptroller and candidate for the 27th Congressional District, Stefan Mychajliw. Stefan, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it. I know you're a very busy man. You made a comment earlier about having 98 Zoom calls today, and I don't doubt that to be true, but you took out time to schedule an interview here with me, and I appreciate it.
Oh, anything for you. Another institution in local journalism, and you've been around the block a long time, highly respected for so many years in journalism circles. I'm happy to join you.
So, Steph, the main reason I actually reached out to you was because you had posted something on X the other day about American Idol, that there were like 40 million votes or whatever, and it was tabulated in like 30 seconds. And you said, why can't we do this? And I tend to kind of agree with you. And I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit more on that because I wanted more depth on that. Now, I'm not an American Idol fan, but I know,
me neither.
But I know the process, and you're right. Like, people vote by phone; they can vote as many as 10 times, and everything is just instant. And we in America have a voting problem. Now, you and I probably think we have different voting problems, but one thing that I think that we can agree on is there's no reason we shouldn't know the winners of all local races within, let's say, a couple hours. What do we do to fix that?
That's a great question. And yeah, it came up. My wife, Ashley, we have a little routine. I do a lot of work at night. I try to get as much prep work for clients done the night before, and she just loves American Idol. And I don't even know the name of the contestant, but she was obsessed with one. And when the voting came in, it was like 10 to 11. She's like, hey, text this number 10 times. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? It's okay, sure. I text the number, and then I'm like, oh, so, do they announce the winner in a couple days? She was like, no, they're announcing the winner in a few minutes. I'm like, are you kidding me? And that's when the light bulb went off. Like, well, if millions of people can vote at the same time across the country for one race, why can't we do that in our presidential elections, our local elections? Even when I ran in 2012 for Erie County Comptroller, nobody thought I would win. I mean, even people in my own family didn't think I would win as, a Republican running in a predominantly blue Democratic county, and Barack Obama was at the top of the ticket. And I remember on election night, the best we can do were projections based on all the absentee ballots that were out. And so we declared victory just based on a projection, not having a definitive answer. And, my opponent was the Cummit, great guy, military veteran. We became friends after the election. And we really didn't have finality until about a month after ballots were cast.
Right.
And there's got to be a better way to do it.
If I recall correctly, there was just a race for judge that was decided last week in North Carolina or one of the Carolinas, I think, from a November election. It's
bananas. And it doesn't really matter where you are on the political spectrum, Republican, Democrat. I mean, our democracy depends on free and fair and trustworthy elections. And I think a big component of that, there was even an election in New Jersey. It was a school board election. The only reason why I know this is because New York State, like Suffolk County, for example, is going to be using the same exact touchscreen voting machines. And a few years ago, they debuted this touchscreen. I think it's Monmouth County in New Jersey. And they declared a winner in the school board election. The person took office. Scott. And 2 months later, they came back and said, whoa, wait a minute, sorry, we had a software glitch, no fraud. And there wasn't fraud. It genuinely was a glitch, because who's going to really hack in? The Russians aren't hacking in for a school board election in Monmouth County,
Maybe in Clarence, though. Maybe in Clarence, though.
I wouldn't put it past him. So the person got removed from office, and they put in the real winner. So even with all this modern technology, they're still not getting it right, whether it's at the national level or the local level.
So how do we fix it?
Well, I think it's a system where I think a uniform. So the problem is every state gets, and obviously that's the way our country was founded, our founding fathers, and the way the system is right now. It's all being driven by each individual state. So you've got not only each individual state with 50 potential different systems, Then you drill down that each county within the state then could have potentially a difference. So in New York, 62 counties, you can have 62 different systems in one state, multiply that by 50 states. So the reason why American Idol had results from 28 million people in 10 minutes is they had one centralized system. All the data in, all the data out, boom, you spit it out and there's your winner. And, if there's any appetite at the congressional level for some semblance of a federal system like that, where it's one system, or you'd have to get all 50 states to agree to use the same software, the same equipment. But even then, they had the touch screens in that one county in New Jersey, and they still got it wrong.
Now, I'm a big 10th Amendment fan, and any right not guaranteed to the federal should be, held by the states. But there are some things where I think, you know what, maybe this should be federalized. Would you support a federal election system?
I would support a system where we can get an answer on election night.
Right.
The same way that American Idol did. Hey, if they said, hey, let's use the American Idol system, and regardless of who you voted for, regardless of who you supported, if we can get answers in a definitive victor and loser in one night, great, let's try it. And I think that's what people really want. Like, and to this day, people still, like, I know a lot of people on the right side of the aisle, they won't even go for early voting, which I support early voting. I think it's great. I always early vote. But
yeah, I think
people are so untrustworthy.
I think your side kind of screwed that one up, to be completely honest with you. You kind of screwed yourself out of some votes because you're like, no, don't vote early. And then election day came and it was rainy or whatever. And
you're 100% right.
I have always
You're 100% right.
I've always felt that it was weird that we had an election day to begin with. Why not an election week? Really. And kind of with the early voting, that's what it's turned into. In fact, it's turned into an election couple weeks. And personally, I think that allows for more people to vote. Now, whether everyone voting is frankly a good thing or a bad thing, there are some people out there that I'm like, maybe you shouldn't be the one deciding things. But
only vote for American Idol, not for a president.
Exactly. But I do think that early voting. Funny. I do think that early voting has allowed more people to vote, and I think that's a good thing. In fact, I voted early in each of the last, two major elections. Three major, I guess. Yeah, three elections. Just because I don't know what I'm doing election day. And I think that a lot of people are like that,
right.
with me having a job that's very unpredictable, and especially I wouldn't really call myself a journalist anymore, but I still do the news. Sometimes crazy things happen on election day and I don't have the chance to get to go vote. So I've voted early.
Especially the elderly.
Sure.
Yeah, the elderly, especially for seniors, they can get sick, things happen, hospitalizations, travel. And from my perspective, obviously being a Republican, I think you just have to say, these are the rules. And we don't set them. We just have to play by them. So you know what? If these are the rules of early voting and that's the process, well, okay, let's, stop bitching and moaning about it and then just maximize your base and do what you can to get your supporters out early. And I think, the right side of the spectrum finally learned its lesson after getting their clocks cleaned. A guy like Scott Pressler who went all over the country and registered voters and encouraged everybody. It was interesting, really interesting, Scott, how all the messaging and campaign literature, again, purely from the right side of the spectrum in this last cycle was bank your vote. That was the slogan, bank your vote, make it count and vote early. Not often, but vote early. And
this isn't Chicago.
But it worked. It worked.
All right, backing up a little bit. Now, Stefan, you grew up in Buffalo. You were a member of the media. You have got all the makings of a radical leftist, and yet somehow you went in the opposite direction. How did you become a member of the dark side?
It's actually a really good and fair question. Yeah, I grew up in the hood. I grew up at William Fillmore in an alley. Grew up in extreme poverty, youngest of 7 kids. Definition of, dysfunction and abuse. My mom did the best she could, raising 7 children as she did. She had 7 kids with 5 different dads. By the time my dad came around, we were basically, if you think of J.D. Vance and Hillbilly Elegy, our family was that, but in the inner city.
By the way, I loved that book.
It's a great book.
I have not seen the movie, but I did read the book. And between you and me, we'll get back to you here in a second, but just reading about his childhood, I thought the same thing. How does the guy that had those experiences end up being, a right-wing Republican? So I guess you're kind of now answering for the both of them. So please continue.
Yeah, and I remember the shame and embarrassment of standing in the free cheese line. All the food in our house had USDA on it, from whether it was free cheese, the powdered milk, the 50-gallon drum of free peanut butter with the oil on top, or you open the can, and, getting in different, I remember getting in line for presents at Christmas, and, I'm the son of immigrants, and they would always say, like, hey, education's a great equalizer. Don't rely on anyone else. If you work hard, you can, climb out of this. And in my formative years, I saw how my mom, again, she hustled and did anything she could to feed her kids. And I remember being on food stamps. Back then it wasn't a fancy debit card. They were actually like stamps, like they, basically a ghetto dollar bill. And I always remember just the shame and embarrassment of being dependent on, whether it was different social service agencies, the government for food, for our livelihood. And, in my formative years, I thought, all right, the best way to climb out of this is kind of hard work, letting me keep more of the money that I earn in my pocket and not going to government. And that's pretty much, from a 30,000-foot view. There was no, like, one person. Like, I didn't watch Friedman or see a Ronald Reagan speech. It was more of just the culture that I grew up in and not wanting to be part of it. And then, again, having the mindset of, okay, what really traps people in the life that I had, and that's why I kind of lean towards the right side of the spectrum.
So when you registered to vote, I'm going to guess you registered at 18, right?
This is an interesting story, Scott. Yes, the day I was eligible to vote, I was a student at Syracuse University. I registered as a Democrat.
Oh, and that's what I was going to ask you. Actually, is 100%. All right.
And the reason why it's a funny story is because when I ran for Congress, there's a conservative group called Club for Growth, and they elect Republicans all over the country. Special interest group. I think they do great work, and you go for a formal interview. Now, the golden rule, whether it's politics or just in your life, don't lie.
Sure.
Especially when the people in front of you have the data that could. So, any congressional candidate or national race, the first thing you do is you do an opposition book on yourself, and then you do an opposition book on your opponents. So I knew Club for Growth had my oppo book, and they knew that I registered as Democrat. And they're like, all right, have you ever been a Democrat? They knew the answer to that question, Scott. You want to see if I would lie? Right. And I said, absolutely. I said, I was a student at Syracuse University. It was the New York State primary, and I did not want Bill Clinton to be the Democratic nominee. I said, so I registered as a Democrat, voted for Jerry Brown in the Democratic primary, and then switched to Republican Party shortly after. So that was my short stint as a Democrat to vote against Bill Clinton. And then that year was the presidential election where I voted for, as a Republican, Jack Quinn in Congress and the first George Bush for president.
Right. Now, are you currently a registered Republican?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Registered Republican. My wife and I live in Elma, New York. We're both Republicans. And,
do you have to be Republican to live in Elma? Is that a law?
Yeah, they don't let you cross the border from West Seneca until you show your Board of Elections card. And they're like, hey, wait a minute, get back to Hamburg.
Yeah.
You're a Democrat. Out.
I can imagine. Now, personally, Stefan, I'm a registered libertarian. I don't know, 15 years ago or something like that. Personally, I feel like I need to re-register as something else, but I'm not. I share a lot of Democratic ideals, but I really don't feel like I'm a Democrat, and I kind of feel like I don't have a party. When I registered libertarian, it was, they had some Democratic ideals, some Republican ideals, and unfortunately over the course of the last 15 years or so, they've gotten taken over by, in my opinion, complete lunatics. So libertarian definitely doesn't represent me, but I don't feel like anything else does either, so I've just kind of stayed.
But you know what's sad, though? Like, everybody nowadays, whether you're Libertarian, Democrat, or Republican, it seems as though like everybody's got to pick a jersey, and it's just so toxic.
Hasn't that always been the
current
case?
climate?
I think we have a
Not really.
pie in the sky view of how things used to be. Whereas, so I know that my parents, for example, told me when I was younger, we lived in the town of Niagara. They said, this is a Democrat town. If you want anything done, you have to be a registered Democrat, and that was 40 some odd years ago.
Yeah, I mean, look, I can only speak from my personal experience. Like when I was county controller, and it's interesting, especially coming from me, saying, "Oh, that damn media," but like a guy like the county executive, Mark Poloncarz, and I know, isn't it ironic?
Yeah.
But like, and I had my political differences with him, obviously, but when it came to doing the people's business and the government's work, we worked really well together.
Uh-huh.
Like we never, in the actual like job of him being the executive, me being the controller, like we worked really well together. And I'll never forget this. I said, why don't we do a joint press release? Because he and I, based on our positions, would pitch to Wall Street to get a better bond rating for Erie County, and which obviously if you lower the bond rating, it's better interest rate, you save money. And so I said, let's do a joint press release, both of us. Let's see how many media outlets pick it up that you and I work together to, literally save millions of dollars. Nobody picked it up.
Really?
Nobody. But even like Democrats, like when I was a Republican, Pat Burke, who's now an assemblyman, ultra liberal Democrat, and he's a good friend of mine. And when he was a county legislator, we didn't have it like penciled in on the calendar where it's like, hey, 2:00, we're having a beer together. But if I was ever in South Buffalo for whatever reason, I'd call him up. Like, hey, let's go to Irish Center. Let's have a beer. Pop, in his case. And we would just meet, or, families would chat, and, I would definitely have a pop or two. And we would separate our politics and our friendship. And, that was 10 years ago when I was more than 10 years ago, geez Louise, 13 years ago when I was county controller. But like, I think in the era of, President Trump and Hillary for Republicans and President Trump for Democrats, like everyone's got to pick a jersey, and it's just so damn toxic, and it's unfortunate. It really is.
Well, I think both sides think that the other side is crazy. And, before I hit record on this interview, I told you, we come from different perspectives. But I don't want this to be contentious because I have always liked you. You and I have always gotten along great, despite the fact that I think that some things that you think are crazy, and you probably think that some things that I think are crazy. But I don't have any reason to dislike you. Other than the fact that, we cancel out each other's votes, and all right, so we cancel out each other's votes.
Yeah, and that's cool in the gang, as it should be. Like, I don't understand, people on both sides of the spectrum. I don't understand having that kind of hatred or disdain for someone just because they have a different view from you. Like,
I think that
that is bananas.
I think that to a large degree, social media and all of them, from Facebook to Twitter, now X, even Instagram and TikTok, has radicalized people, and made everyone crazy. Literally made everyone crazy. And I don't know how to get past that.
Well, again, back in the day when I first started in journalism, we were on typewriters. We didn't even have a computer in our time. Like the cell phones didn't exist. If you wanted to bitch about someone, you'd have to tell them.
Right.
Or, you're a newspaper guy, or you wrote a letter to the editor and you put your name on it. Like there's some semblance of accountability if you bitch to someone, like, okay, they know who it is.
Right.
And you're either saying it directly to them, or you put it in writing, okay, this is me, this is my address, yeah, I own that. And now it's just so easy. There's no accountability, and there's no way you can actually gauge the hate that you're putting out because there's nothing coming back at you. Right. There's no accountability in it.
And now, like...
and the irony of...
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, now, like, Red Dog 1113 can, like, say something crazy, and you don't know who that is. Except I know that it's you. Right.
And the irony of ironies, when I was county controller 9 years, I didn't even control my own social media. I didn't know the passwords to my social media.
Right.
For a few reasons. One, I didn't trust myself. if I have a couple of Obolon Ukrainian beers, I'd want up in the Buffalo News, like, you mother, and I would just, whoop. And so one of it was truly a defense mechanism to, you're never hurt by anything you do not say.
Right.
But it was, in some respects, it was also, in some respects, 9 of the most peaceful years of my life. Because I didn't know what the hell people were saying. I didn't know what, and obviously if it was something sensitive, my staff who controlled it, they would say, hey, we're going to put this out. Yeah, sure. Okay, go ahead, knock your socks off. But I couldn't even post on my own social media.
Right.
By design. And it was great. It was great. And every, blue moon, someone, I'd see them in a van or public, they're like, hey man, I said this about you. It was really harsh, really sorry. No problem.
Right.
and I have no idea.
Right.
But yeah, and I think it's just so much easier to launch attacks and be deeply impersonal and never even think that there's someone on the receiving end of the vitriol that you're putting out.
Right.
And you're 100% right. Social media has really made it easier in that respect.
So, Stefan, I know you mostly as a TV personality, TV newsman. Did you do newspapers before that?
No, never. I mean, my experience before with the newspaper was like writing an editorial too for the Daily Orange, the student newspaper at Syracuse University.
Gotcha. So you went to Syracuse for communications and then went right into TV?
Yeah, I was a junior and broke as a joke. I was, driving a Huffy bike around the campus of Syracuse University and all my friends, BMWs and wealthy families. And I just had to hustle all the time. Mm-hmm. And I was a student volunteer at our TV station. And so I learned how to, pick up a camera, like real TV studio equipment. And then WSTM TV in Syracuse had an opening for a part-time photographer. And I did not want to be a photographer. I wanted to report. And I said, hey, it's my way to get my foot in the door.
Right. And
then I'll try to get on the air. And I begged the news director like once a week, like clockwork. I'd go in his office, hey, put me on and be like, no. And then, one weekend, like 97 people called in sick. And he said, all right, you got your shot. If you suck, I'll never put you on TV again.
Right.
And I was horrible. They never should have put me on again. Oh, I sucked. It was so bad, Scott. It took me I never forget it. It was like a Memorial Day story. I was in a cemetery, nice ceremony. It took me like 30 minutes to spit out like 10 seconds on camera. That wasn't like a serious case of the mumbles or stumbles or dropping an F-bomb on tape. And then eventually, my whole family's here in Buffalo and I wanted to get back to Buffalo and I came back home.
Right. All right. So you did the media here, then you went into politics, and then after the 27th, you started doing media consulting. Is that right?
Yeah, I had no interest in running for controller again. I just had the philosophy of, all right, founding fathers wanted, citizen legislators. I didn't want to make it my entire life. And people told me all the time, like, hey, you can be Alfreda Slominski, who's great former controller. Like, you can have this job until you die. And I'd rather set myself on fire. And so ran for Hamburg supervisor, kind of like my one last hurrah, still wanting to serve, but in my hometown lost. And I said, all right, God's way telling me to do something else. And then I joined, my best friend is a Buffalo guy, Chris Grant, former Chris Collins chief staffer, and he ran a consulting firm called Big Dog Strategies. And so I joined Chris and then started consulting on national campaigns. And that's how I really got involved with national politics, was through Big Dog Strategies, helping Republicans all over the country, from, Maine to Alaska, down to Hawaii and back to Florida. And that's what I did before joining the Vivek Ramaswamy campaign.
Gotcha. And now you're back to doing media. Tell me about your current gig.
Yeah, it's great. It's a blessing. I'm in the newspaper business. It is a blessing beyond belief. When I was with Big Dog, they sent me to New Hampshire for a week, and they said, hey, you got to work with this guy. He's running for president. His name's about as easy to pronounce as yours. And go help him out, set him up for his launch. So I went to New Hampshire for a week with Vivek Ramaswamy, and I was only supposed to be there for a week. Help him with his launch, and then go back to Buffalo and Big Dog Strategies. And Vivek called Chris Grant, our CEO, and said, hey, I like this guy. I need a spokesman. He's a bulldog. can I kind of steal them for the next year and a half? And so that's what I did. I transferred over to the Vivek Ramaswamy's campaign. And then obviously after he lost, Chris knew the gentleman that owns the newspaper in Long Island, Suffolk County, called the South Shore Press. And literally, he was looking for someone to kind of be the news director, manage the paper. And Chris says, hey, my buddy Stefan is a media guy. Why don't you give him a call? And lo and behold, it's literally as simple as that. That's exactly how it worked out. And so I write and host podcasts and shoot videos for the South Shore Press in Long Island.
Do you ever have to go to Long Island for work, or are you able to exclusively work?
Oh, do I ever?
Oh, yeah?
Oh, do I ever? Yeah. I go once a week in New York. We do, but thank God for technology. Like,
oh, yeah.
With the staff of reporters, and we do our daily Zoom call. But I go to New York and Long Island one day a week. There's an early morning flight to JFK that I'll take. If I stay the day, I'll take like the 6:30 a.m. flight to New York, and then take the last 10:30 p.m. flight home, or I'll just crash overnight and come home. But yeah, I'm in New York usually every single week, and I love it. I kind of have that journalism bug in my blood, and as you know, it's hard to, when you got the itch, to scratch it.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a lifestyle. Though I got to tell you, I mean, most of the people that I worked with throughout my different campaigns, and by campaigns I mean journalism careers. They're all doing other things now, whether it's public relations or whether it's, government jobs or whatever. Almost no one that I worked with is still in media. And I think it's largely because they realized $30,000 a year is never going to cut it. And that's pretty much all you're ever going to make.
Yeah.
So.
You're right. Yeah, the salaries are nuts. I mean, even when I started in 1993 at WSTF, I know for a fact I was making more then than I think what some of the young reporters are making now on TV. Because you remember, early 90s, there was no competition. It was 3 networks. And so there was money in media. You can raise a family on it. But I'd rather start my car in the garage than be a reporter now in any media market. The pay sucks, as you know. And I mean, who wants to spend weekends? Again, Scott, you know the drill.
Oh yeah,
they're working holidays, weekends. Job. Right.
Yeah.
We've got my wife and I have young kids. Screw that. I'll let someone else go and work for $25,000 a year to sit at the base of the Skyway and say, hey, everybody, it's snowing and it's cold and the Skyway's closed.
Yeah, I was talking to Brad Ryder the other day about it. He said, he said it doesn't matter what I'm doing. I'm always thinking of how can I use this for my job? And I recall when I was a full-time reporter, it was the same. You go to Tops to get bread and you run into, the county comptroller, for example. And next thing you know, you're standing in an aisle at Tops having a 45-minute conversation and you go, well, that was work. And you just wanted a loaf of bread.
Yeah, you're right. And that's why, I always said to myself, for lack of a better phrase, if I got back in, I would do a community paper, and again, it's Long Island, so it's really it's considered down there. It would be a major newspaper here in our neck of the woods. But I would love to do, talk radio or kind of do that newspaper thing. And I think for guys like you and I, not to sound corny, but our goal, our purpose, we try to use the gifts and talents that God gave us to find whatever profession and passion, and then you go and do it.
Right.
And mine was always, I always thought, communications, I can write, I love public speaking. So, I get to, even, you doing this podcast and, still being in, some semblance of a journalism mode that we're using the gifts and talents we have to pursue our passion. And that's a good thing. And I love it. I love the newspaper business. Again, it's around here, it would be considered a major newspaper just because it's, Long Island and New York City.
Right.
And loving it so far, and we'll see where it goes.
Do you see yourself being back in politics in a more direct sense at any point?
I don't think so. I mean, I really don't. Towards the end, that's when, and you recall 2016, it started getting crazy on both sides of the aisle, and I would get death threats, and there was a couple times literally the sheriff called me. It's yeah, get your wife and kids out of the house. my wife went to the in-laws, and, we'd have like Antifa showing up at the house. And it just wasn't worth it. Like, and we did great work for taxpayers, and I'm really proud of the work that we did, helping people that, 99% of the time that we served or did something good for people never got attention. No one ever knew about it. And that's why I did it for as long as I did, because it was really fulfilling. But in the kind of toxic arena that it is now, I wouldn't turn down, no exaggeration, I would run for Elma Town Board in Elma, New York, because I'd still get to serve my community. It's in my backyard, but without the baggage, without the vitriol and the hate and the social media and things like that. Like, I'm not interested. Like, I zero interest in running for anything other than maybe Elma Town Board years down the road.
All right, Steph, I think I got everything out of you that I need to get out of you. Now I just have to cut the video apart, or cut the audio apart, put it together to say a bunch of things that you didn't say, and broadcast it as though that was what you did say.
Love it.
All right.
You're the boss.
I appreciate your time, and I wish you the best. Except
I
I want
catching up with you.
I want all your candidates to lose, but other than that, I wish you the best.
Hey, as long as they pay me, it doesn't matter.
That's the clip. That's the one I was looking for. All right, brother. Thank you, man. Have a great day, and I appreciate you doing this so much.
All right, you got it.
All right, bye-bye.